On today's episode, we're gonna have Josh Raglin, Chief Sustainability Officer of Norfolk Southern. Welcome to the call, Josh.
Hey, great. Thank you for having me, Mike. It's great to be on Traffic Jam for the first time. I appreciate what you do, and here to talk about Norfolk Southern and sustainability.
Awesome. No, we're looking forward to hearing about it. So when we jump in and go ahead and get started, how did you get to where you're at? What's your journey been like? Where have you
I
been?
was trained in wildlife biology coming out of college, did some wildlife consulting there, and met someone from Norfolk Southern, and we spent some time together. Hired on with the company 25 years ago. For over 2 decades, I worked in our nature-based solutions on some of our own properties, doing ecosystem restoration, a lot of forestry, wildlife research, forest carbon projects, but also worked closely with our first chief sustainability officer, Blair Wimbush, back in 2007 when we first started our sustainability program at Norfolk Southern. So I'm actually the fourth CSO at Norfolk Southern now. So I've been in this role just a little over 2 years, but it's really been fun, and it's very important to many of our stakeholders now.
What are some of the goals that Norfolk Southern has set in regards to their sustainability journey?
We've actually pulled together a sustainability advisory council within the company, and we've also done a materiality assessment with a lot of our stakeholders. And we've identified 5 areas that are kind of our focus areas for environmental sustainability. The first one's decarbonization. It's really about how do we lower our emissions overall. Over 90% of our emissions are locomotives. So a lot of our efforts there have been reducing our locomotive emissions. We set a science-based target, had that approved just last year, to have a 42% reduction in our emissions intensity over 15 years. That's very aggressive. A lot of that's going to be locomotives, but we're also doing other projects as well. The good news is we've made a 7% improvement first year alone. That was driven primarily by locomotive fuel efficiency. We improved by 5%. We also tripled use of our biofuels as well, which is part of our route going forward. But we're doing other projects as well. We're doing a lot of our crane replacements, such as some of the cranes, the overhead cranes that are intermodal facilities there in Chicago and Atlanta as well, upgrading other equipment, upgrading vehicles. And then we've got our second pillar, which is facilities. It's really about our built infrastructure, our buildings, focusing on energy and water. And so we've done some progress there on renewable energy purchases, our first in Pennsylvania just last year. And then our new headquarters building in Midtown Atlanta just opened up, and we've just received our LEED Gold certification. So those are 2 of the pillars. The third pillar is circularity, and that's really about how do we think about things before we buy them, or how can we just reuse assets? And the rail industry has a great story there. Many of our assets are very long-lived, and we can take those assets at end of life and repurpose those. Great examples are locomotive modernization program. We just announced our third installment there with Wabtec. And by year 2025, we'll have 950 of those units modernized. So it's the most modernized fleet in North America. So that's continuing to improve our fuel efficiency and working through our supply chain, which is our fourth pillar. Is lots of times we don't make locomotives, we don't make fuel. So it's very important that we work with our suppliers to reduce our emissions. And the fifth pillar is nature-based solutions. That's where I've worked at for 2 decades. And it's how do we think about our environment differently and approach it to where you can save revenue or save money, save expenses, but also in some cases produce revenue as well. So those are kind of the 5 areas we're working in. I know that's a long answer.
No, that's great. It sounds so it's just by measuring the numbers, taking a look at them, understanding them. You guys reduced it by 7% in the first year. I mean, it's pretty simple. It sounds, pretty easy to just look at the numbers and all of a sudden you got a savings, right? So your job paid itself off.
There's a lot of work that goes behind that. Is a lot of technology that goes behind that, particularly locomotives. When I first started working at the railroad, there wasn't a computer on a locomotive, and now you've got over 350 sensors on locomotives. So we get a lot of data. We're pulling fuel burn data every 15 minutes from our locomotive fleet. We've got a director of fuel efficiency now, and she uses this data to look at how are we operating our network all the way down to the train level and the crew level. So really driving fuel efficiency and making a concerted effort across departments to improve our efficiency there.
What are some of the incentives behind mitigating emissions?
I would say overall it's about what can we do as corporations to address climate change, and not just climate change, but everything in the environment, right? We all depend on clean air. We all depend on clean water. And it's important to corporations to do that. It's important, first of all, to our employees, right? They want to work for companies that are doing things that are good for the environment. Secondly, it's important to our customers. Many of them now have decarbonization goals. They're starting to measure their supply chain emissions. For the average company, their supply chain emissions are 11 times their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So there's this huge elephant that they're trying to understand of first of all, how do we measure it? And then how do we manage it? How do you take one bite of the elephant at a time? And some companies are focused on different things, but we've got a number of customers that are focused on logistics, and they're now factoring in carbon as part of that logistics decision. So I think it's just doing things that are right. It's the right thing to do, but it's also good for business at the end of the day. If you think about fuel emissions or just fuel expense, that's our third largest expense. So anything that we can do to reduce our fuel burn is going to help out the environment. It's also going to help out the bottom line and the communities in which we operate. So it's just a growing pressure there. The third pressure is investors. There's a lot of pressure from shareholders. They want companies to go green. They're willing to spend their investment dollars on companies that are greener. And the rails have a great story there. We've got a great ESG story that resonates with shareholders. I get to communicate with many of them during our off-season engagements, and they want to know what we're doing for the environment and what's your plan forward, what's your pathway towards your emissions targets, but also what's that pathway towards net zero.
What are some of the partnerships that Norfolk Southern has?
Yeah, partnerships are extremely important for us. Sustainability is a journey for all of us. It's important that we work together towards those goals. So, a lot of our partnership is around how can we help our customers and help our economy. And so, from the environmental perspective, we need to take more trucks off the road. I mean, that's just the way it works. Trucking is our partner, but there's a lot of long distance shipments out there that we can help with long distance shipping by rail. We're on average 75% less emissions. The way that we directly compete is intermodal and our bulk transfer network. So intermodal now is almost 50% of our volume. Our bulk transfer facilities, both of those together allow us to have customers that aren't directly served by rail. And so we're working with our customers to understand that. We're having customers actually starting to share data now, such as their truck shipments, to where we've got some visibility into their trucking shipments that we've never had before. And what that allows us to do is to come back with them with solutions. And so it's really understanding their business so we can provide solutions. Another partnership that we recently announced was Comtrex. They're a logistics platform. They're going to be a great partner of ours because they understand the rail industry, they understand the bulk transfer network, and they're going to help us get rail to more customers that are unfamiliar with rail. So, that's a great partner there. On the sustainability side, from a rail car perspective, we recently announced a partnership with U.S. Steel, Greenbrier companies on 800 sustainable gondolas. They're made of recycled steel. It's very high strength. It's lower weight, which adds capacity, which means we can ship 3 to 4% more product per rail car, which is sustainability.
Wow.
If you think about it, it's efficiency. It's doing things that are good for the environment as well. So that's a great partnership. And then, if you think about just our logistics network in general, we've got some big channel partners like JB Hunt, like Hub Group, like Snyder, that understand the value of rail, and they're working with their customers to bring more product to rail as well. And then as we think about, non-government organizations, we work closely with some groups there. We just recently hosted a sustainability summit with Sustain SC. That's a group that we helped found in South Carolina that brings together businesses and conservation groups to create win-win solutions. And we think it's a state model that's going to be replicated in other states and even other countries. And the last organization I'll point out is Drawdown Georgia. Georgia has the ambition to be the first net zero state. And that's important for us as we have our new headquarters there. We've got significant operations in the state. And so we're working with around 20 other businesses with substantial footprint in the state of Georgia to measure our emissions within the state. And then also, how do we manage those emissions? So I just had actually a call this morning with our transportation working group. How can transportation be part of that solution as well?
Does Norfolk Southern have any online tools for their customers to use, and where can they be found?
Yeah, one of the most recent tools that we launched was our online carbon calculator. And what's we talked about the measuring of Scope 3 emissions, and how do you quantify that? And historically, the railroads, we've had carbon calculators out there. We released our first one back in 2008, and it was based off system-wide averages. And so I could tell you, okay, we can move a ton of freight 470 miles on a gallon of fuel. But you know what the range is? The range is like 150 to 900. So I really need to drill down at the commodity level. So we have examined over 17 rail car types, 30 commodities plus intermodal. And that's what our calculator is based off. It's the most robust in the rail industry worldwide, no doubt. And we've got over 75,000 origin and destinations across the US in there. So that's over 7 million pairs that you can go. And it's not just Norfolk Southern Rail, it's the entire rail network in the US, and we're going to expand that product to North America as well. So it allows them the visibility to go in and look at their emissions on the lane level. And the other tool that we're launching for our customers is their emissions data. They're going to be able through our portal for customers. It's called Access NS, and they can go in there. That's where they track their shipments. That's where they order rail cars, but they're going to be able to pull their rail emissions. And it's very powerful data. It's going to be very accurate. And we think that's where the industry needs to head as groups like the Securities Exchange Commission, focus more on these Scope 3 emissions.
How do you align with your competitors?
We are really aligned as an industry. In fact, I just met with all the head mechanical officers of all the Class 1 railroads, and we've got to have industry alignment as we think about the locomotive of the future. What's the research that needs to be done? What's the policy that needs to happen? So, it's an exciting time in the rail industry. You think about an industry that's been in diesel fuel for 90 years. And, and our near-term solution is increased biodiesel. Renewable diesel is a great product there. Some of the roads in with operations in California are utilizing that product. It can lower emissions intensity 50 to 80%. We just need more states in our territory to adopt low carbon fuel standards. So that's kind of the near term. Battery electric locomotives, that's an opportunity that's out there now. You've got some of the first ones coming to the United States in operation. The lead time's about 1.5 to 2 years to get those, but a number of the railroads are ordering those. We think it's an opportunity there. The battery technology's come a long way since we produced our electric locomotive back in 2007. That thing had 1,080 12-volt batteries like you'd buy from the auto parts store. So the battery technology's come a long way. So we really think starting out, those are going to be in the yard and the local fleet, but eventually there's going to be opportunities on line haul as well. And then thinking longer term, what's that zero emissions, product for the rail industry? We think hydrogen, is definitely an opportunity. It's been, used in passenger trains in Europe for over 5 years now. There's companies out there that have converted locomotives from diesel to hydrogen, and there's a number of OEMs in the United States that are looking at that as well. There's a lot of money out there. Infrastructure bill, there's $10 billion in there for hydrogen funding. There's going to be 5 hydrogen hubs established in various parts of the United States. So there's a lot of funding now. It's only good for a short period of time, though. So we really need to focus on what are the pilot projects that need to be occurring right now while we've got this funding available.
Has Norfolk Southern worked on any sustainability projects, particularly in Chicago?
Yeah, one thing that really stands out is our dual mission reward program. And it actually came out of a conversations that our international intermodal team was having with our supply chain partners, the trucking companies, the steamship companies. And there was this huge backlog of containers. And what we started realizing is the containers coming, or the trucks coming into our Landers terminal there in Chicago, 85% of them were leaving without a load. They were leaving empty. And we said there's got to be an opportunity here to incentivize the trucks, to incentivize the steamship companies. We just need more collaboration to occur. And so we offered a monetary payment of $200. Program is still into effect. It's doing very well. And so for every time they complete a dual mission, which means they bring a load and they leave with a load, we track that. And every time they do that, that's $200. And so it's really paid off for us. When they contacted me, I was like, we think there's a sustainability story there. And I was like, daggum right there is. I said, look at all the empty truck miles you're taking off the road. And then we started throwing some numbers at the miles saved and applying that to emissions in an urban city like Chicago. And that's significant. And so we've expanded that program to Kansas City. And then recently we've expanded it to Charleston, South Carolina as well. So doing creative things like that just to incentivize the right behavior is really more of what we need to be thinking about as we think about, supply chain emissions.
Great information. Loved it all. And I think our listeners will too.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
To learn more about Norfolk Southern's ongoing efforts to build a better planet, visit the sustainability page of their website.
And if you want to learn more about the Traffic Club, please visit our website at www.traffic-club.org. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Traffic Jam.